From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
This is it. We are the first people to see him from the public, and we really confirmed that he is really gone and he's no longer with us.
As thousands of mourners line up to pay their last respects to President Nelson Mandela, we go to Johannesburg, South Africa, to speak with longtime anti-apartheid activist Ronnie Kasrils, who helped found the armed wing of the African National Congress with Mandela.
I got involved after the Sharpeville massacre as a young student, same time as Eleanor, and it was out of shock and revulsion for what had happened at Sharpeville and the general revulsion against the apartheid system. I sought the ANC out. It was not that easy. They'd been banned, but of course one had friends and contacts, and I got deeply involved very quickly. After decades living underground, Ronnie Kasrils went on to become a top military official in the South African government under President Mandela. He later served as South Africa's intelligence minister. We'll talk with him about his years with Mandela, the apartheid struggle, President Zuma, and the future of South Africa. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The White House says enrollment in Obamacare insurance plans continues to improve after a problem-plagued first month. Around 250,000 people signed up in November, double the month before. More than 800,000 people have also signed up for Medicaid eligibility. Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius touted the improvements in an appearance before Congress.
Now, as more Americans give healthcare.gov a second look, they're finding the experience is night and day compared to where we were back in October. And they're responding by shopping for plans and enrolling in greater numbers.
Despite the troubled rollout, the White House says it still expects to meet a goal of 7 million enrollees by March. The Pentagon's announced a media blackout on information about hunger-striking prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. The latest wave began in February and grew to as many as 106 prisoners over the summer. The Pentagon now says it'll stop disclosing how many prisoners are on hunger strike and will reject all media requests for information. A military spokesperson told Al Jazeera, quote, "It's the strikers' desire to draw attention to themselves, and so we're not going to help them do that." The latest statistics to be released show 15 prisoners are on hunger strike, up from 11 last month. The head of the National Security Agency appeared before Congress Wednesday to defend the bulk collection of U.S. phone data. General Keith Alexander compared the mass sweep of phone records to the running of a library.
If you look at all the information that is out there, the billions and billions of books of information that are out there, there is no viable way to go through that information if you don't use metadata. In this case, metadata is a way of knowing where those books are in the library and a way of focusing our collection, the same that our allies do, to look at where are the bad books. From our perspective, from the National Security Agency's perspective, what we do is get great insights into the bad actors overseas.
A proposal from Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy would end the bulk collection of phone records without a court order. But Alexander told lawmakers that even if approved, the measure would not necessarily end warrantless collection, depending on judicial interpretation. Opposition leaders are refusing to meet with the Ukraine President Viktor Yanukovych in the aftermath of an intensified crackdown demanding his resignation. Dozens of people were wounded Wednesday when riot police stormed a large protest encampment in Kiev. The officers eventually withdrew after demonstrators refused to leave and ultimately grew in size. Yanukovych has faced weeks of protest over his decision to strengthen ties with Russia over the European Union. In Washington, White House and State Department officials said the U.S. is considering sanctions against Ukraine.
The United States was appalled last night by what happened in Kyiv. The Ukrainian government's response to peaceful protests over the last 2 weeks has been completely unacceptable, and it's difficult to understand why they have decided to move against their own people repeatedly with force, rather than engage in a real dialogue with the opposition.
All policy options, including sanctions, are on the table. In our view, but obviously that still is being evaluated.
Protesters in Thailand have cut off power to the compound of Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra amidst the country's worst political crisis in years. Dozens have stormed the compound in the latest protests over alleged government corruption. Yingluck dissolved parliament and called new elections for February earlier this week. But demonstrators are seeking her immediate resignation. She's not in her offices and gave a national address today from a separate location. In a blow to the opposition, Thai military leaders have turned down a meeting request from protest leaders. The top commander of Syria's Western-backed opposition has fled across the border to Turkey. The move by General Salim Idris of the Free Syrian Army comes after fighters from the Islamic Front seized his forces' bases in northern Syria. The move prompted the U.S. to suspend all non-lethal aid to Syrian rebels. White House spokesperson Josh Earnest confirmed the freeze.
We have seen the reports that Islamic Front forces have seized the headquarters in question and warehouses belonging to the Supreme Military Council, and we're obviously concerned by those reports. We're still gathering facts and consulting with General Idris and the Supreme Military Council staff to inventory the status of U.S. equipment and supplies that have been provided to the SMC. As a result of this situation, as you pointed out, the United States has suspended all further deliveries of non-lethal assistance into northern Syria.
A prominent Syrian lawyer, human rights activist, and leader of the anti-government protest movement has been reported missing in a rebel-controlled Damascus suburb. Ghazan Zaytouna disappeared from her apartment along with her husband and 2 other activists after receiving threats from Islamist groups. Following the chemical attack in Ghouta earlier this year, Zaytouna appeared on Democracy Now! To describe the carnage.
We started to visit the medical points in Ghouta to where injured were removed, and we couldn't believe our eyes. I haven't seen such death in my whole life. People were lying on the ground, in hallways, on roadsides, in hundreds. There haven't been enough medical staffs to treat them.
Witnesses say Ghazan Zaytouna's apartment was found ransacked with laptops and other belongings removed. You can go to democracynow.org to see all of our interviews with the Syrian activist. The families of 2 Spanish journalists have come forward to reveal the pair's kidnapping in Syria. Journalist Javier Espinosa and photographer Ricardo Garcia Villanova were reportedly seized by al-Qaeda-linked rebels in September. Espinosa's wife, Monica Prieto, urged the kidnappers to set them free.
The idea that all the journalists covering Syria are risking their lives for the Syrian revolution, for the Syrian people, for the Syrian freedom, democracy, etc. So I think no Syrians in the Islamic State, they should think carefully about what are they doing for the revolution, for the Syrian country, for the Syrian freedom by kidnapping journalists.
The families say they've come forward because of an impasse in talks with the pair's captors. The 2 were apparently trying to leave Syria near the border with Turkey when they were seized. Mexico's Senate has advanced a controversial measure that would overhaul the country's energy sector. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto wants to open the state-controlled oil company to investment from foreign multinationals after 75 years of nationalization. Jesus Zambrano of the leftist party of the Democratic Revolution said that if given final approval, the measure should go before a national referendum.
We warn all private, national, and above all, transnational business and companies that want to come and invest in Mexico and petroleum in order to expropriate Mexican petroleum to think again. The most probable outcome is that within a year and a half, a recall referendum will reject this change.
The energy measure now goes to Mexico's lower house for final approval. The Obama administration continues to ask lawmakers to hold off on new sanctions against Iran during the 6-month nuclear deal. Iran is receiving a limited relief from U.S.-led sanctions in return for scaling back its nuclear activities. But a bipartisan group of lawmakers is pushing legislation that would press ahead with sanctions approved by the House over the summer. Secretary of State John Kerry told a House panel he has doubts about Iran's intentions, but said the agreement should be respected.
I came away from our preliminary negotiations with serious questions about whether or not they're ready and willing to make some of the choices that have to be made. But that's what we put to test over the next months. We're asking you to give our negotiators and our experts the time and the space to do their jobs. And that includes asking you, while we negotiate, that you hold off imposing new sanctions.
Despite the administration's request, Democratic Senator Robert Menendez and Republican Senator Mark Kirk say they expect to introduce new sanctions measures as early as this week. Iran has warned any new sanctions would nullify the nuclear deal. Michigan lawmakers have approved a measure that would make insurance plans charge extra fees for covering abortion. Critics have dubbed it the rape insurance law because it would force women to purchase separate policy riders. Democratic Senator Gretchen Whitmer denounced the measure.
This tells women that were raped and became pregnant that they should have thought ahead and bought special insurance for it. By moving forward on this initiative, Senate Republicans want to essentially require Michigan women to plan ahead and financially invest in health care coverage for potentially having their bodies violated and assaulted.
Michigan would become the 9th state to require additional fees for abortion coverage. Republican Governor Rick Snyder vetoed a similar measure last year, but the new law will not require his signature. Dozens of protesters gathered outside a New Jersey immigration jail Tuesday to mark International Human Rights Day. 8 protesters were arrested after chaining themselves outside the Elizabeth Detention Center to show solidarity with detainees and families separated by deportations.
There are many immigrants from the New York area who are processed through the New Jersey Detention Center. So this is one of the central processing areas is through New Jersey, and so it was very important to do an action here. There have been not one more actions across the country, in Arizona, in California, in Chicago, and the community here in New Jersey wanted to stand in solidarity with the brothers and sisters across the country and say that it's time for President Obama to stop the deportation. President Obama can do it with the stroke of a pen, can change the lives of millions of immigrants.
The vigil was part of a national campaign to urge President Obama and Congress to pass immigration reform and end deportation quotas. Meanwhile, in Texas, an immigrant rights group is claiming to have uncovered nearly 100 immigrant detainees who remain jailed in El Paso despite being cleared for parole. The National Immigrant Youth Alliance says its organizers allow themselves to be detained in order to infiltrate the El Paso detention center. You can go to our website at democracynow.org for our web-exclusive coverage of the immigration actions in New Jersey and Texas from Democracy Now!'s Cassandra Lazaire and Renee Feltz. The chief of staff to Republican Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee has been arrested on charges of child pornography. On Wednesday, federal officers detained Ryan Loskarn and searched his Washington, D.C. home. Senator Alexander says Loskarn has been placed on leave without pay. Florida prosecutors have dropped domestic violence charges against George Zimmerman, the man who killed unarmed African-American teenager Trayvon Martin. Zimmerman was arrested last month after his girlfriend, Samantha Scheib, accused him of pointing a shotgun at her and trying to choke her. But she has since refused to cooperate with prosecutors. Zimmerman had been ordered to surrender his firearms after his latest arrest, but will now get them back, as he did after being acquitted of Trayvon Martin's murder in July. And Pope Francis has been named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Francis has captured global attention for his criticism of capitalism, his softer tone on key social issues, including abortion and homosexuality, and his calls to refocus the Church towards the needs of the poor. Time managing editor Nancy Gibbs said the pontiff was chosen, quote, for pulling the papacy out of the palace and into the streets, for committing the world's largest church to confronting its deepest needs, and for balancing judgment with mercy. A Vatican spokesperson reacted to the honor on Wednesday.
The Pope does not look for success or honors, but if the declaration of the Pope as Man of the Year means that many people have understood the message of the love of God for all that the Pope spreads in the world is a very important message for all, then this is good news and the Pope can be happy.
Pope Francis beat out 4 runners-up: NSA leaker Edward Snowden, gay rights activist Edith Windsor, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily, independent, global grassroots news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org today. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.